Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody who is watching our podcast. This is podcast Happy at Work, and my name is Tatiana Koval. In our podcast, we're discussing the different important topics about employee happiness, corporate culture, and employer branding. And today we have a very interesting expert in employer branding, Celeste Sirin. Hi, Celeste.
Hi, Tatiana. Nice to be here.
It's great what you could participate in our podcast. And today I want to discuss with you employer branding topics. I know what you are one of the wonderful international experts. But before we are starting, may I ask you to tell a little bit about yourself? I hope what all of my audience could follow you on LinkedIn after our conversation. Please, could you tell? Could you make a little introduction by yourself?
Okay, I'll try and make it as quick as possible because there's quite a lot of history behind me. But I come from a traditional recruitment background, and having worked on a temp desk, bulk recruitment, and done conventional transactional type of recruitment in the old days. But thereafter, I found myself working in a recruitment marketing agency where I was responsible in those days for print media advertising and worked predominantly in print. That was before social media and online recruitment advertising took place. I then also was responsible for response management because in those days we were taking response from all the response coming from the print media activation in the local and the national and international newspapers. I then simultaneously was very curious about this whole thing around employer branding, Tatiana, because I thought to myself, you know, the way people are advertising jobs and that, it just doesn't make sense. They're all leaning into what service or product they actually offered, but they never spoke about their actual place of work. So I became very curious, and that's when I started doing a bit of research around employer branding, and it really sparked my curiosity. And I did a little bit of studying through the Employer Branding International College and qualified there, and as I say, simultaneously established Employer Branding Africa in order to create a space within the African sector and raise awareness on the importance of positioning companies as places of work.
Thank you for your introduction. Celeste, I know what you are living in Cape Town, but is it correct?
So I'm living in Cape Town, which is supposed to be the second best tourist destination in the world. And I stay in a beautiful, I really am fortunate to be staying in a beautiful city in South Africa with Table Mountain, beautiful seas, beautiful winelands, and we still in our tourist season now. We have a lot of people, a lot of Europeans, a lot of Americans, a lot of people from the UK, people from Germany, and they love it here because they're spoiled for choice. There's just too much to do.
This very wonderful city. I hope to see it in my life in the future. But I know what you are working not only in South Africa, you also working with other countries in Africa. And today I want to discuss a little bit about employer branding in different countries which know in Africa and what are important for these regions, or what are the perspective of this region. And my first question for you, maybe not about employer branding, but about labor market. What is the specific of labor market? Because from labor market, we have impact on employer branding. How could you describe maybe in different countries which with which you are working right now? What is the labor market in South Africa and in other countries?
Well, Tatiana, our region it's quite challenging. We have quite a disconnect between the have and the have-nots here. And our unemployment rate is sadly one of the highest on the globe. We have the same challenges as many talent markets in that there is a lot of people that are unemployed, but when it comes to the skills availability, the high demand skills availability, there's a disconnect. So you've got that widening skills gap with not enough skills to fill those roles, those specialized roles, which is quite unfortunate, because that obviously spikes a lot of macroeconomic, socio-economic factors in that when it comes to poverty and unemployment and youth unemployment as well. So you will find that in the African territory, we have a lot of entrepreneurs, because when people cannot be employed, what they do is they go out there and they have to create employment for themselves. So our employment and our business sector is filled with so many resilient entrepreneurial business people, and I'm talking about small to medium enterprises as well as solopreneurs, that are incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly skilled. And in fact, I attend an HR networking breakfast on a monthly basis, and collectively I am always completely blown away when I have a look at the innovation and the creativity of all these service providers that are serving the labor sector, whether it be health and wellness, whether it be employee engagement apps, whether it be coaching, mentorship. And it's incredible the wealth that we are sitting with. So they serve the labor market in that regard.
Mm-hmm. If you talk about education and
Yes.
what is the main problems and the challenges in this sector from the employer's perspective, and is it popular between companies to work with universities or maybe with schools and so on?
So we have quite a lot of multinational representation across Africa, including South Africa. So you'll find the big players that have got a footprint here in South Africa. And we're talking about the Unilevers, the Nestle's, the well-known multinational brands. And they are very proactive in going to the different universities and actively recruiting there for youth talent, and running a lot of graduate recruitment programs as well. But again, it's the tip of the iceberg, because we've got such good, qualified, educated youth, but just not enough jobs to be able to absorb them. So with the result is we find that our youth start looking overseas to actually migrate into other global territories just because of lack of employment. But we've got very good universities here, and they are also internationally recognized. And in fact, I've got 2 students that are at university. They're studying BSc, and very good educational sort of tertiary system. I would say that in terms of our secondary educational system, and I think we don't stand alone as a country in this regard, there's always room to be done there. I think that we are lagging behind. I think there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of work that has to be done at the elementary stages. So almost like the feeder into tertiary, and then from secondary into tertiary, and then into the workplace. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done there.
Mm-hmm. You told about the gap between what business the business needs and about the labor market. So as I understand, you have migration of very highly potential talents because it's difficult for them to stay and find a job in your countries. But for example, how companies decide this problem? With the highest salaries, with investing in employer brand, with launching new programs. I'm talking about these gaps in the real situation, this balance on the market. How come try to fix this problem? Or maybe they start to invest in technologies and which let them to work without additional employees.
Yeah, I think, you know, Tatiana, the sad thing, and I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly. Yeah, I feel that with AI and automation coming into the mix, I think that's going to fuel the situation somewhat, because obviously companies are streamlining their workforces and that. I think that the progressive organizations, and I'm talking once again, if you are agile and resilient enough to see the merit in taking youthful skills into the workplace, I always say, hire the behavior and attitude and train the skill. If you can see the merit in that, I think your small to medium and your small organizations have got a lot to gain from that. It is maybe a little bit more achievable in doing it that way versus having the governance and the legislation in your bigger organizations. But I'm hoping to see that companies do start recognizing the merit in doing that, Tatiana, because that is the only way, I think, and I'm not once again talking about just our country. I think there's opportunity to close that skills gap, because we hear over and over again that is qualifications everything, or can we start leaning a little bit into a skills-first workplace? Yes, you know, I think that's possible, but within reason. You know, you still need, to a certain degree, need that theory. I mean, if you're a civil engineer and you have to start building bridges and that, you can't just go with your pick and your whatever and go out and start building. You have to have the theoretical knowledge and the degree or the diploma to be able to put that in place. But skills-wise, I think that there are good transferable skills that can be adopted in the workplace.
I want to talk about employer branding. In this specific market, labor market, why a company invest in employer brand? Or maybe then they don't like to invest. What is the situation, current situation with employer branding in the companies in Africa?
Okay, so Tatiana, I always get posed with the question of employer branding is about marketing. We've got too many unemployed people. Why would I actually go out there and start marketing? Why should I be doing that? Because we already got candidates that are knocking our door down and we can't cope with that. You know, so why would I go out and market? A lot of people are so short-sighted by the fact that if they are wanting to hang on to their talent and they need to keep reminding their people on why they have chosen this place of work, they need to keep embedding the value exchange between what is being given to them by that organization and how they're being valued in terms of their impact, their belonging, their contribution. And that educational process is important, because I think people too often than not overlook only employer branding and marketing as being external and promotional and attraction. focus, which is so, so wrong. Because employees in the workplace have got short memories. They come to work and they go through the motions. And if you are not elevating the reason for why they are there, the first phone call that comes through from an agency looking for great critical high demand talent, they will jump ship and they will consider that. So I think that internalizing the employer brand is very much the focus, in Africa at the moment, because again, universally, there is that requirement to hang on to scarce skills and talent, because it costs too much money to replace the individuals, but it also costs money for the organization if it's a job that needs to continue running and they haven't got someone in that role. They stand to lose achieving their goals and the profitability. So I hope I've answered your question there, Tatiana.
What are the main trends you see in this area? Maybe some changes for the past years. What situation impact maybe in this area, and what we are looking, if we are looking at the future, what tendencies could you see in this area?
I reckon that companies are starting to become far more intentional on how they can satisfy the value exchange between what they are providing their employees at the moment. And I think they have to up their game. Otherwise, they're almost like consumers. They're going to start shopping around and looking elsewhere. So if companies are going to intentionally hang on to their people, they're going to have to start tailoring and almost validating whether they are addressing the needs of the various generations within their organization, because that blanket approach no longer works. So, whether it be skills development, introducing AI and automation and growing their people, having a look at how they are going to ensure that that succession planning is in place so that they keep the appetites of those individuals at bay. Otherwise, they're going to start getting restless and they are going to start looking elsewhere. So it's so important that companies, I reckon, are going to be focused very much on that. Also, the whole, we live in a rainbow nation where we have got so much multicultural diversity. We also have multi-generational talent. And we've got, we used to be on the tip of Africa, but slowly, we are starting, because of our good skill sets that are available here, I think the rest of the globe is starting to recognize us on the tip of Africa and say, you know what, there's potential in this country or in this nation. And especially when it comes to the diverse, multicultural, and I say the generational, opportunities, and whether it be disabled, whether it be women, whether it be your new generation coming into the mix, considering that part as well, considering that, the DE and I factor as well, and then the wellness as well. I attended a workshop last week, and we've got a very sad, unhealthy world at the moment, and attention to that is also important, because I don't believe that companies are getting the best out of their workforce if they are not paying attention to the well-being, which is affected by macro influences, whether it be elections that are coming up in our country. We've got elections happening at the end of May. We've got inflation. We've also got inflationary problems. Our petrol prices are up and down continuously. So mentally and financially, people are stretched, and looking after those interests which are out of their control is very, very important for any employer that's looking at nurturing their employee base.
Mhm. I want to ask you about the difference. Maybe you see this difference, or maybe now, between the global companies. You mentioned them when you described the situation on the market, and about local companies. I know what in different countries you have a different situation. In one country, the local and global, they are strong competitors, and they both invest in attracting the best talents from the market. In other markets, mostly international companies take best talents, and local never pay attention to employer branding. What is about your market? How do you see that? Do you see the competition between global and local? Or, for example, the young or adults prefer to work only internationally, so the local companies don't like to invest? Or you have a really strong local companies, and you see they are the same situation, with employer brand, with people attraction. How could you describe this situation with global and local business?
Yes, I hope I'm answering your question correctly. Yeah, I think when it comes to your multinational organizations, I think they are providing better opportunity for our people here, because it's an opportunity for our talent to travel across the globe and experience other cultures and countries and everything. So if you've got a high demand software developer and they have an opportunity to join a multinational or to go and work in person overseas, they'll jump to the opportunity. So our national organizations and our small to medium organizations they really have to look after their people, because they do stand the risk of actually losing them to these big organizations that are creating a more lucrative opportunity. So the competition is rife at the moment in terms of hanging on to our talent, because they see opportunity to go abroad and scope to actually develop themselves and grow themselves. And, there's just more opportunity there. As I say, because the jobs are limited, they're now reaching into that borderless environment in order to look for greater opportunity. So the whole education around employer branding is really important in our local market, because they need to understand that if they don't up their game, they are going to lose the talent to your global players.
It is interesting what in your country, for example, you don't have a limitation, at least in language knowledge. For some other countries, they have a local language. The multinationals could work only the talent pool who speak English. So it is the natural limitation, but in your countries there is no this limitation. So this is a real risk for the local companies. I want to ask you one more about investment in education from the company side. In the situation when you have a very high unemployment rate, when you understand that maybe it's not so big problem for you to attract new employees, not about talents, because talents really is tough competition for the real talents, but attract employees. Do companies in Africa invest in education of their employees, trainings for developing soft or hard skills, or just employers as a persons have to invest.
Okay. So there's a lot of, we've got a workplace skills plan where with different services seaters that recognize companies upskilling individuals within their organization. So our government incentivizes companies that are either employing or upskilling individuals. They get rewarded by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And on an annual basis, organizations, they submit their workplace skills plan in order to say, we need to actually train these people. How much are we rewarded if we upskill this person, and that person? So from a public sector perspective, you can actually, or from a legislative and a governance perspective, you are rewarded, you are incentivized from our government when you invest in your people.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Because the possibility of trainings and self-development is a part of EVP for a lot of companies. Yes. I want to ask you about maybe some specific of EVP, because as I see in the different countries, the different topics become more important when we talk about employee value proposition. In some countries, the more focus on financial or stability, and other countries more on the atmosphere in the companies, on innovations, on the mission of the company, and so it is you have a huge difference. What if we talk about companies in Africa, or maybe some specific of EVPs? What is more important as a base, and also for becoming the best employer of choice, employer of love, not of. I absolutely understand that if you have the highest salary on the market, you could win, but in this situation, but the heart of your employees not be with you. So I want to discuss what is the different part of EVP. You see what they could work with people in Africa. Yes. They are become more and more popular.
I think there's no one fast rule here, Tatiana, because I think like every organization, they build their own sort of tailored EVP, and each one's got their own. You will always have that common thread where everyone focuses on purpose and people first and all of those good things. But what impacts, and I'm talking generally here, what impacts the EVPs across Africa is very much the macroeconomic environment. So if we are in an inflationary, recessionary environment, it's going to impact on money, remuneration, incentives, commission, all of those things when it comes to the tangible monetary part of one's EVP. Not only that, also I go back to the wellness, whether it be financial wellness, mental wellness, physical wellness. Are our people feeling okay? How are we looking after them? Are they strong enough to be able to do the job, and be productive enough? So it's very much, there is no one fast rule. Yes, the different generations, I know they focus on, some people at the end of the day like to have that socio-economic or environmental purpose, or, they look at that. But when times are hard and they are trying to put food on the table, that's not going to be a highlight in their employer value proposition. And again, it depends on your generations, because, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure your generation says, and even my children, they've got a different outlook on life. They want that flexibility, and it's real stuff. It's not just me, echoing what the industry across the globe has to say. I see it with my children. They say, I don't want to be like you, where a baby boomer, you work around the clock, you don't even take a 4-day week, you don't have fun, you just work. We don't want that kind of life. So they're looking at very clearly a different kind of value proposition, So, yeah, difficult to answer. There is no one set rule, really, or one set EVP. It's really dependent on the company and how you're tailoring it to which generation within your organization.
Mm-hmm. If they talk about the culture, what the specific of culture do you see? For example, if you work with a company who the first time, global company, decided to go to your market, they decided to implement the EVP, and also we understand what they need to build the culture. They have their own culture abroad, but maybe they need to take into account some specific of countries of Africa. What could you recommend? Or maybe it's about some cross-cultural specific.
I think a lot of people underestimate that, underestimate the territorial nuances. Once again, as I say, we live in a rainbow nation, and it's not just about looking after their needs. It's also understanding I call it the purchase intent, which is how do they look for opportunity? The channels of communication, where are they hanging out for opportunity? So what happens in Germany or in Brazil might be very different to what's happening here. There might be similarities in that, but you have to respect the fact that if you're wanting to reach a certain demographic or a certain culture, that some people use local newspapers. Some people, you can't go onto WhatsApp because they don't have data or they don't have connectivity. So how do you reach those individuals? Especially when it comes to, for example, FMCG companies, where they're in the outlying areas, in the rural areas. How do you intend getting to those people, speaking to them, engaging with them, whether they are permanent employees to keep them up to date with what's happening in the company, or whether it's trying to attract a certain skill or demographic? I think appreciation for those kind of specifics within Africa needs to be kept very close at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then the language barrier as well. I mean, when I worked with Zimbabwe, when we built the employer value proposition, we put the EVP as well as the values on bulletin boards so that they could have them printed and hung up in their factories and in their mills. So that's what I'm saying in terms of culture. If you want to keep if you want to keep impressing on those individuals, you might not be able to remind them via WhatsApp or other communication channels. But if you've got a bulletin board which they're walking past every day that they check in before they start working on the production line, that's their way of communicating.
Mm-hmm. If you talk about the channels, what is the most popular channels now with what the company have to use if they decided to work in Africa? also, I understand that could be depends on the target audience, but what the tendencies you could see if it's about online and offline channels?
You know, every African territory's got their preference, and normally it's using a multi-channel approach. Again, you know, if you are in Botswana or Zimbabwe, they might prefer the local newspapers. They might
printed
print local print newspapers, or they might prefer that you do an open day at the organization and invite people to come in. Or you might be going and reaching your youth at the different varsity university open days. So it's all again dependent from one country to the next. In South Africa, online and digital media is very much the way to go. Job boards are still being used. We've got different job boards that address different job types. And again, it's a multifaceted approach of going to market. And it also, again, depends on the demographics. How rural are they? How outlying are they? How central are they? What is going to be your best way to reach your people?
Thank you for our conversation. And I have one last question for you.
Of course.
Usually I ask my guests about free tips. But what type of tips I want to ask you to give? If we imagine what we are talking with HR directors from other countries, and they decided go to your countries for work, or they become responsible for Africa as HRD. What three main tips could you give to this person?
Good question, Tatiana. Good question. It's very, very important to understand, once again, our demographics and the fact that we've got almost like a cross-section of cultures within a lot of different cultures within one country. So understanding the demographics and understanding all of those demographics is very, very important. Again, appreciating what kind of content these people like to read and what kind of content these people like to digest. Understanding as well the macro environment and, you know, what's happening, the political situation, the almost like the day-to-day living environment that people are living with. I might be experiencing life differently now to someone else in another city or another town within my country. So it's understanding the way of life. And then along with that is, what are those communication channels? How do people roll in this country? What is their preference? Because it is very different. I'm not saying it's very different. There might be an alignment to what happens in Brazil, to what happens here. But I think in order to understand the macro, but also the different socio-political environment that we're living in, and yeah, how people apply for jobs here and how to reach them is very important.
Thank you for the conversation. It was really wonderful. I hope we'll have a possibility to meet again in the future. And I could recommend to all my audience, follow you on LinkedIn. I think from your posts, from your activities, they could get more and more information about employer branding in Africa, about human resource management in Africa. And You're welcome to our podcast. You're welcome to my audience from different countries, and hope to see you again, Celeste.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much.
And this is a podcast, Happy at Work. And I'm Tatiana Koval, and hope you enjoyed our conversation about employer branding and human resource management in Africa. Stay in touch.
Thank you very much, Tatiana.